Student finance. What is it? How exactly does it work? That is what I'm going to be breaking down. Now, when I talk about student finance, I'm talking about the financial support available for eligible UK students for when you look to go about your undergraduate studies. Now, in terms of the cost of going to university, there's a couple of different associated costs which Student Finance England have broken down. Now, that first cost is what we call your tuition fees, and the second, your maintenance fees. Now, let's break those down a little bit further. So if I take those tuition fees, I'm referring to the cost of the tuition for your course. Now, in order to help you to pay that, that's where Student Finance have a tuition fee loan. Now, once you've applied for this loan and it's been approved, that money will then be sent directly to the university. So what that means is there's nothing to pay in terms of tuition before or during your course. So that's the first side. The second side is your maintenance costs. Now, when I say this, what I'm referring to is your day-to-day living costs. So things such as your rent, your food, your transport. Now, in order to help you to afford this, that is where we have the maintenance loan. Now, in terms of this maintenance loan, what you get is going to be dependent on two key factors. The first one being where you decide to go to university. The second being your household income. So when I talk about where you're going to university, Student Finance typically break it down into three key places. First one being London, i.e. if you're looking to go to university in London, perhaps you're planning to relocate to London itself and stay in accommodation there. The second is what we call outside of London. So when I say this, what I mean is if you're looking to go to a university outside of London and you're planning to stay in accommodation there. So for example, if you're planning to stay in accommodation here at Essex. That third category is what we call home. Now, what we mean by home is if you're planning to commute to and from home for university. Now, the reason it's broken down this way is because there's different associated costs of living depending on where you look to go. And therefore, there's different amounts you could be entitled to depending on which of those categories you fall in where you're planning to study. Now, that second category is what we call household income. Now, in terms of the maintenance loan itself, it's broken down into two key sections. One part of it is going to be non-income assessed. So if you're eligible for student finance, you'll be able to receive this non-income assessed part. Now, this could be added to depending on your household income. And now, in terms of how that part works, if your household income is below a set threshold, you'll be able to receive the full amount of the non-income assessed and the income assessed part of the maintenance loan. Equally, if your household income is above that threshold, then you won't be eligible for any of the income assessed part. Equally, if your household income falls somewhere in the middle of the minimum and the maximum, then you will be eligible for a proportion of that income assessed part. So the way I like to look at it is a little bit like a bar. So there's a certain amount which you'll be eligible for, which is non-income assessed. That part depends on where you look to go to university. Now, in essence, that can then be topped up depending on your household income. So what that means is that everyone might be looking to receive a different amount in terms of those maintenance costs. Now, you might be thinking that I've never had those conversations around household income before. And that's where it's really important to try and have those conversations at home where necessary. The reason I say this is because you're likely going to be making financial decisions about university before you even arrive. So for example, accommodation might be something which you choose ahead of starting at university. So if you've got an indication of how much you might be eligible to receive, that will then help you to make the best financial decision in terms of things such as accommodation. It will also allow you to plan if you'll perhaps need to save up ahead of starting at university, or if perhaps you want a part-time job to help to support you whilst you're at university as well. Now, in terms of this maintenance loan, it is going to be paid directly to you because it is for your day-to-day living costs. Now, this is going to be paid to you in 3 installments, typically at the beginning of each academic term. And now, in terms of student finance, when you're applying for the first time, applications will typically open up the March of the year you're looking to go to university. And we recommend for you to put your application in as soon as possible. And that means it gives student finance plenty of time to look through all of the details. And when you're applying, there's going to be 2 key parts. There's one for yourself and one for any parents and guardians. Now, everyone has their own individual circumstances. So if you do have any questions about your individual circumstances, that's where I recommend contacting student finance directly, and they will then be able to help. So that's the 2 main costs of going to university. You've got your maintenance loan, you've got your tuition fees, and once you've then got those, you'll be reapplying each year. So should any circumstances change, that will then be reflected. So let's fast forward to the point at which you graduate. Now, once you graduate, you won't need to repay your student loan until earliest the April after you graduate. So that's going to give you a little bit of time to get on your feet and perhaps into your first graduate role. Now, you're only going to be repaying the April after you graduate if you earn above a set threshold. And now, in terms of what exactly it is you're repaying, it's going to be a combination of your maintenance loan, your tuition loan, plus any accrued interest. And what you will be repaying is a percentage of what you earn above that threshold. Now, you're going to be repaying this until one of 2 things have happened, until either 40 years have passed or you paid off your loan, whichever comes first. So that's something which is really useful to bear in mind when it comes to tuition fees and maintenance and student finance in general. Now, in terms of student finance, it can work, as you will have seen, differently to some student loans. So it means it's unlikely to affect your ability to get a mortgage or your credit ratings as well. So there are just a few key things to bear in mind when it comes to student finance. But as mentioned, if you have any questions in terms of student finance, make sure to reach out directly to student finance themselves or speak to teams at universities, and they'll be more than happy to help.